Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of R-Rated, where today we're going to be looking at the 6th episode of WandaVision, all-new Halloween Spooktacular. It's interesting trying to, think through these episodes because we've definitely got, at all points, this parallel motion. We've got what's going on inside what's now being called, the Westview anomaly or the Maximoff anomaly, and what's going on outside of it, which all the stuff going on outside is not real time, but it's got a pretty clear sequence of events. All the stuff inside, it's jumping around a whole bunch. But to jump on into it, first of all, we got our title sequence, and kind of our vibe for the start of the episode is Malcolm in the Middle, which I was not really anticipating. There might be some other reference being made from the intro sequence, but the credits, the font they use for the credits, and the kids talking directly to the camera in the early part of the episode is super Malcolm in the Middle as a send-up, which is such an interesting thing for a couple of reasons. One being that it's weird to have the characters talking directly to the camera at all, but also that we skipped the 90s altogether. Malcolm in the Middle debuted in January of 2000, so we've entirely skipped the 90s. I don't know if we're going to go back to the 90s at some point in this, but because the last episode, the last episode was Family Ties and Growing Pains, is their two main influences there, and that was on a very special episode where we got our new version of Pietro Maximoff, played by Evan Peters from the X-Men franchise, and I was kind of wondering going into this episode what kind of details we were going to get about that. So I was kind of trying to see, okay, so is it that this is in fact the X-Men universe version of him that's crossed over? Is it a reconstruction of Pietro from this universe, but for some reason he has alternate universe face? Is it an issue of she can't really remember him well? And we're going to get into that, but it was the biggest focuses of this episode are definitely the sudden inclusion of this character and what that means for the anomaly and for Wanda, but also the continuing strain of attempts to reach Wanda inside the anomaly and figure out what's going on. We got a couple cute references to the comic book costumes for Wanda and Vision. Wanda's red M hat gets referred to. She calls herself a Sokovian fortune teller, which is kind of a nice thing to do with that. And I guess Vision's outfit, he describes. He says that oh, you know that I love Mexican wrestling, so I guess that's supposed to be a luchador outfit. I guess I don't know, but they look ridiculous, and it's great. It's a great cheesy way to include their comic book version outfits into there. Let's see. Vision is still in the neighborhood watch. That's still consistent even despite the time jumps and things that are going on. We see Herb later, who's running the neighborhood watch dressed up as Frankenstein. It's always a good time. As we hop outside, we see that this is taking place pretty much immediately after the events of the last episode. Literally maybe the second the previous episode is over, it jumps directly into the next one, because they're walking back from the wall, and the anomaly is turned very red, and Monica is throwing shade at Hayward over his handling of the whole situation, and Darcy jumps in as well. And I love the fact that Hayward's oh, so which one, so who's the sassy best friend then? And not leaning into the editing is cute because that's when Jimmy Woo pops out and has his thing to say, but not a sassy best friend way. He's just hopping out there, but it's just funny to have Jimmy Woo just kind of. There's clever editing where you can say a thing and imply something without the characters diegetically, implying it, and I think that was kind of a cute little thing to do there. Jimmy Woo kicks some ass. The three of them, Jimmy Woo, Monica, and Darcy, get escorted off the base by a bunch of armed sword soldiers, and Jimmy and Monica just out of nowhere just beat them up and knock them out, take their stuff, and Darcy's just well, you could have told me the plan. But I thought it was pretty cool. Like, I would expect Marcy to be Marcy. I would expect Monica to be able to do some good hand-to-hand combat. I wasn't really expecting Jimmy to pull it off, but I guess his FBI training has helped him out there. So that was kind of cool. So now we've got Jimmy and Monica and Darcy are now kind of undercover. Not undercover. They're sort of on the outside of S.W.O.R.D. now, trying to figure out what's going on. Meanwhile, inside, Wanda and Pietro actually do have a conversation about the fact that he looks different. He kind of plays it up as being like his hair, because so him and Tommy, one of the twins, go and get costumes, which are basically the Quicksilver costume. I don't super recognize the one that Billy has on. He's got a red cape and a blue bandana, and it's familiar, but I can't quite place it. So I don't know what that one is off the top of my head. I'm sure I'll see it later, and it'll be like a whole thing, like, oh yeah, that should have been obvious or something. My hair is like all over the place right now. But so they talk about it, and Pietro kind of insinuates that maybe the reason he looks like that is because it would be too traumatic for Wanda to actually see her brother's face. So she's just kind of put someone else's face on him, essentially, and it's Pietro, it just doesn't look like him, which would strongly imply that that this is not a multiverse thing. This is not a Pietro from the X-Men universe is here now. It's just a construct that is close enough to Pietro that she can kind of attach to him, but not have his face. Kind of a subtle thing to add to that, but the way that so a lot of superpowers in movies will have special effects that go along with them, and if it's planned well, then characters will have very specific special effects or visual effects, and it will be so not only will they have specific ones, but they'll be really distinct and discrete from like everyone else's. Pietro does use his super speed, as does Tommy. Tommy, who also gains super speed by the end of this episode. We'll talk about that. But Pietro uses his super speed, and the special effect that's there is pretty much identical to the one that Pietro uses in Age of Ultron. So it is a consistent through line there. It doesn't look like the way things look when Quicksilver does stuff in X-Men, in the X-Men movies. So a little kind of a subtle, acknowledgement that this probably is not the X-Men universe version of Quicksilver. So it's interesting too, because that means that now with both Spider-Man Far From Home and WandaVision, that's twice in a row that we're getting multiverse fake outs, which is interesting to me. Now, granted, we are going to get Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, so there is going to be something coming eventually. But in the meantime, it seems like they keep playing up the multiverse aspect of it, but it keeps being red herring. So I'm curious how that's gonna go from there. So there's some fun high speed running around doing things. Herb also seems to be kind of aware of what's going on. So in the same way that Agnes in the previous episode asked Wanda directly, like, do you want to take that back? Do you want to do that again? Herb in this episode also, when she finds out that Vision isn't doing the neighborhood watch and lied to her, Herb is basically like, do you want me to do something about that? Do you want to fix this? Do you want me to, like, in a way that's not in character? It's the guy playing Herb. So I'm curious if Herb and Agnes have like a special significance to stuff that's going on since they've been able to do that. But we are going to come back to Agnes in a bit as well. We also get to see what's going on kind of on the edge of town and in the background. So anywhere that Wanda actively is, things seem pretty normal. But the further you get from Wanda, the more stuff doesn't really seem to work right. So you see this woman who's hanging decorations, and she just does this and puts it down and puts it up and puts it down. In the background, you see her husband with a jack-o'-lantern putting it down and picking it up and putting it down. And she literally can't move. She's just doing this. She can't even move her head, but you can see that she's crying. She's got a single tear. Oh, I don't know if my video is getting a little bit jaggy on me all of a sudden here. I'm going to fix that if I can real quick. But yeah, so like it's unclear. Or not, it's unclear. It's very clear that these people are at least somewhat conscious of what's happening to them and want out. They're stressed and they are in some kind of pain, essentially, emotional, mental pain. We get another commercial. We get a commercial like we have in all of the in-universe or in-anomaly universe, I guess, episodes. For this one, we get Yo Magic Yogurt. And oh my God, I apologize. I hope the video is not coming through too weird. I'm like closing something in the background, but it seems like it's not helping a ton. But Yo Magic Yogurt, which there's a lot of things going on here. First of all, the flavor of yogurt that's presented there is strawberry, another red. All the commercials have had red as a really prominent thing, so that's been kind of interesting. Someone online pointed out was it Lagos? Yeah, the Lagos paper towels. The spills are all red, very much like blood. And so it's kind of like, and there's a point where she like can't clean it up and she's got blood on her hands. At the very end of the commercial where they sweep up the thing and everything's off camera, there's just this long moment of kind of silence in the commercial where you just hear dripping. So both dripping blood is kind of an ominous thing, but also the idea that it didn't go away and it wasn't cleaned up. It's just off camera and out of view, but it's still there. A lot of really good metaphors and a lot of really good implications kind of being played with these commercials. But this one, we have Yo Magic Yogurt. And it's presented in such a weird, dark, grim sort of way. You've got this kid on a very tiny little desert island starving to death. And he's talking about how hungry he is. And a shark shows up. And it's like, yo, I used to be hungry too. Oh, what did you do? I had Yo Magic. And like, it's like an ad like that. And the kid's like, can I have some? It's like, yeah, here you go. And he throws it to him. And the kid is apparently so weak that when he goes to open the little peely bit, he can't quite get it. He can't kind of gets it, but he can't pull it open. And he's struggling with the yogurt cup. And then the sun and then the moon, and then the sun and the moon, the day, and like days are going by, and you're watching this kid wither away until he finally dies and is left as a skeleton still holding a yogurt cup. And that's it. The commercial, Yo Magic, and the snack for survivors, which is a really fucked up thing as well. But it's just like, all right, that was a lot. That was a very dark commercial. It's the first one that hasn't visibly had the man or woman from the other commercials, though this one was animated. It was done like a claymation style, so I don't know how that would have fit otherwise. It's possible that the woman voiced the child character. That's a common thing with voice acting. Excuse me. But yeah, it was just kind of an odd, very weird kind of commercial for them to play with on that. We get this kind of interesting thing in the background. So earlier in the episode, Pietro takes Billy and Tommy, and they go and steal everyone's candy and then smash all the jack-o'-lanterns and then spray everyone with silly string. So he's a terrible influence on them, which Wanda rightly calls out later on. But interesting, they're walking away from a movie theater that's apparently playing The Parent Trap and The Incredibles, which is interesting for two reasons. One, The Incredibles was a movie from 2004, so I guess inside the world of this show, they're kind of in 2004 or the mid 2000s or something. But what's weirder is The Parent Trap is either A, the original one from the 60s, or it's the one with Lindsay Lohan, I think, from 1998. And there's not many reasons that The Parent Trap would be playing just randomly 6 years later. Although now that I'm literally just thinking about it, so it makes sense. I've just kind of realized what the point of that little backwards reference is. So The Incredibles, aside from being a superhero movie, is also about superheroes being forced to not be superheroes or being forced to hide their identity and work secretly and all of that stuff, which carries shades of like the Sokovia Accords and all of that stuff. And then The Parent Trap is a movie where I believe the idea is I can't remember so there's two versions of the movie, and I forget if I'm remembering the wrong plot or if each one of these does a different version of the plot. But I believe the idea is that they are twins. They're twins who were separated at birth, whose separate, adoptive parents meet and fall in love, and they use the fact that they're identical twins to trick the parents in a bunch of ways and like pretend to be each other and all of that stuff. Or if the idea was that they are not twins, they just look basically identical, and that might have been the original one or something. I don't know, but the twin thing is a big, part of this show. Both Billy and Tommy as Wanda's twins, but also Wanda and her twin brother Pietro. So I don't know why that took me till right now to realize was like the point of that, but there we go. But what's interesting is Pietro's role in this episode and perhaps in the show seems to be it seems like he is sort of her conscience trying to call out to her and make her realize what's going on. Because so at one point she seems really upset with him and then asks him, well, so earlier in the episode, he has a flashback. Again, playing with the Malcolm in the Middle thing, they have a flashback to Halloween when they were kids in Sokovia, which I don't know if they even have a Halloween or Halloween equivalent, but then Wanda immediately is like, I don't remember it happening like that. And it's sort of like, so either Pietro is making shit up, or maybe that's the implication that Pietro has some control over what's going on here. Also, there's a lot of like possibilities for what's going on with that. But at one point she turns to him and says, "What happened to your accent?" Which he rightly immediately comes back with, "What happened to yours?" Because neither of them sound European at all. She sounds like she's from the Midwest. He sounds like he's from like New York, New Jersey. And there's no reason given explicitly of why he would be the long lost brother. Though later in the episode, he outright like acknowledges the fact that he died. He also talks about the fact that Vision died too. And actually that's something that pisses Wanda off a lot, which we'll get to. But he was saying that, yeah, he got shot in the street and then he could hear her calling for him. And it's unclear if like what that means. My guess would be that he's fully a construct of Wanda. And the question is, does he disappear when she makes this all stop? And I think that he has to. I think that Pietro and Vision will both be gone permanently at the end of this season. We've only got 3 episodes left, so they've got to start getting there, you know. Tommy gains super speed all of a sudden, and very excitedly is just running around and doing all that stuff. And again, there is the Incredibles, because later Billy winds up having a couple powers, but it looks like he has some kind of telekinesis at one point, or like a force field thing. But he also seems to have some kind of like telepathy or something by the end of it. So basically Tommy seems to be sort of Quicksilver-ish, and Billy seems to be kind of Scarlet Witch-ish, which I think is how they sort of work in the comics, like as actual characters. Like they basically are, you know, powers-wise, somewhat copies of the twins before them. So it's weird. There's been points where the aspect ratio has jumped a bit from, actually, no. So the aspect ratio in the earliest episodes was standard definition 4:3. And then later on they went to widescreen. I don't know if it happened in earlier episodes, but in this one, when we're inside the anomaly, we're in widescreen. And when we're outside the anomaly, we're in like super widescreen. Like we're in like IMAX level of like, you can see the letterboxing coming in real hard. Like it jumped out in the second half to me as being really jarring. Like all of a sudden there's a huge portion of the screen that's just gone. It wasn't noticeable to me before. I don't know if they were doing it before, and I don't know if they're doing it to make sure that there's an aspect ratio variance between what's going on inside and outside the anomaly. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on with that. But speaking of the outside, apparently Director Hayward secretly figured out a way to track Vision by tracking the decay of vibranium, I think. Yeah, decay signature of vibranium, which for me, I'm just like, oh, I guess, does vibranium have a half-life, I guess? Because I don't remember if it's ever been stated as being radioactive, especially with like the entirety of Wakanda like being built on it. I feel like that'd be something that would be, known or mentioned or something. But apparently Vision... So at one point, Vision finds a cul-de-sac where he just walks in and everyone is frozen still. No one is speaking. No sound is happening. Everyone is frozen. And he kind of at this point realizes, I'm just kind of done with this. And he just kind of morphs back into his normal outfit. And then, which is interesting for a couple reasons. He said in the last episode that Wanda can't control him. And it's unclear if he, in a similar way, maybe to Pietro, may have some control over what's going on. Because he can do the zap thing, which frees people temporarily from Wanda's control, but also his, like, was he phasing his outfit on or something? Like, I'm not entirely sure what's going on with that. But so he decides to not really bother hiding anymore, and he kind of heads straight up, and he looks around the town, and he sees that there's this one car on the edge of town just sitting at a stoplight or a stop sign, and he flies over, and it's Agnes in like a witch costume, and she is kind of despondent. Like, she's really just kind of like, Wanda won't let us leave. She won't even let us think about leaving, kind of thing. And he zaps her, and she freaks out because she's like, oh my God, you're one of the Avengers. You can help. And Vision doesn't know any of this. He doesn't remember his time before he came back. So he's like, I'm one of the Avengers. And she's like, what? Don't you know? I mean, maybe something happened when you came back. And he's like, came back from what? And she's like, you're dead. You died. You're dead. And she like freaks out in the car. And he kind of, again, like with Abalash, he had to put her back into the thing, and she turns around, and he decides to walk to the edge of, well, he doesn't know it's the edge. He walks just into the distance, and eventually he finds the edge of the anomaly. On the inside, it's blue. It is still blue on the inside, even though it's red on the outside. But so he starts to push through it, and Sword shows up, and Darcy shows up too. And as he's pushing through, he's struggling to stand, and like pieces of him start falling off, like little, like it's like a shell essentially is just kind of falling off and getting yanked back into the anomaly. And he, like, Darcy's trying to get them to help Vision, and they refuse. Sword does nothing to help Vision at all, and Billy suddenly manifests his power and tells Wanda, is like, it's Dad. He's in pain, and there's soldiers and all this stuff. And Quicksilver, or Pietro, sarcastically says to Wanda, is like, what are you worried about? Your dead husband can't die again. Like, your dead husband isn't going to die a second time. And she, like, just energy blast knocks him to the side, and then just concentrates and uses her power to expand the hex. It is now significantly larger than it was before. It is now breaching into other areas. You actually get a shot of it, taking over the Westview sign, like the town sign, and going way out from that. The Sword base is now entirely enclosed within the hex, and it's been turned into a traveling carnival or traveling circus carnival, one of the two. I think it's a carnival. There's like auto shops and things, like basically all the nearby towns have been consumed too, and it's just this huge thing that's happening now. It's Darcy gets handcuffed to a car and and is now stuck in there. Vision gets absorbed by it again, and then Darcy gets absorbed by it also. So they're in the hex. Unclear if Jimmy and Monica made it out. They hijacked a car. They hotwired a car from the Sword base to go meet the aerospace engineer that'll help them get back in. but it looks like they got out. They were racing to go meet the guy in the ravine or on the other end of the ravine or something like that. So there's Wanda seems to be slowly, like, she's refusing to listen. Pietro seems to be trying to talk her down generally or get her to realize what's going on, and it's not really taking. There was this one really gross shot, this really gross smear blur thing. It's in the Sword headquarters. They're looking at this overlay, and it pulls up to look at Hayward and the others, and for some reason it's like it had a ton of motion blur put on it for no reason, like it was meant to be like a whip cut, but it wasn't. So it's just this like move, but everything is like stretched and weird for a sec. I don't know how that happened. It was a very bizarre thing to be in there. But yeah, so that's kind of where we're at this point. So now Darcy's in. Oh, Monica was saying before that she wanted to go back into the hex, but Darcy was like, you can't do that, and showed that her blood tests came back. Sword had, her blood tests on file, and apparently when you cross that barrier into or out of the hex, your entire biology is rewritten, and it's been done twice to her. And like she basically tells her, like, you are different in some way. So I'm curious if this is going to result in Monica Rambeau getting superpowers. This could hypothetically be the start of mutants in the MCU. I was kind of wondering if near the end of this, if Wanda uses the hex and just like essentially blows it up, and either everyone that's inside becomes a mutant, or if she kind of expands it in a way where it stretches over the whole planet, but it gets rid of the mind control. And again, lots of mutants. It's sort of an inverse of House of M, if that's how that goes. I wanted to double check one thing real quick, because I think she is Monica Rambeau in the comics is an actual hero, I believe. Spectrum, yeah. So we might be getting that. I don't know. Interesting thing. So the series is called R-rated because it was a fun pun on my name, and also that at the time the focus was on movie reviews in particular. And the logo, which I'll pull up over here, I guess, has a neat feature to it that I never really got around to using that I'm going to use now, and that's that little color bar on the bottom there that goes from red to green. It was meant to both be just kind of a figurative visual, for like bad to good, like a spectrum of bad to good, but it was very carefully laid out so that it would also be like a useful way of doing ratings from 0 up through 10 based on how full those were. Like there would be like empty or full cells in there if they were if it was a 5, it'd be halfway. If it was a 3, it'd be down near the bottom. If it was 7, it would be closer to the top. And I never really used that. And part of me wondered if that would be kind of like spoiling my thoughts on something if I just have the thumbnail or something be like, all right, today we're going to talk about Avengers Infinity War, and here it is as a 9 or whatever. Like, I don't know if I would have given it a 9, a 10, an 8, whatever. But I'm going to go back real quick here and rate the WandaVision episodes. I don't think I'm going to do that for the older reviews just because, a lot of time has passed for those, and, I would rather pick a rating and stick with it than have it be something that I can kind of revise later on. Like, these are things that I've watched over the last couple of weeks, so it's much easier to kind of go back and fix those. So the first episode of the season, filmed before a live studio audience, I think I would give a 7. Very solid start. It's got a very spooky mystery kind of vibe to it, especially the end when the hearts come to dinner and have that weird out of character moment where the cameras kind of get spookier and the lighting is a little spookier and the angles are harsher and the shadows too. It was a very good episode. It kind of set things up, but it wasn't like I was gonna say land breaking. That's not right. Groundbreaking kind of thing there. It was very cool though, so I like that. It was a 7. The second episode, Don't Touch That Dial, I think I'm gonna give a 6. It was fine. It didn't feel like it set very much up. I think the most that it really did was it showed that Wanda does have her powers here. like explicitly is able to use them and stuff. And it added a little bit to the mystery, like Geraldine showing up and knowing about her powers and, or sort of knowing about her powers. She kind of like tripped on it and then didn't get acknowledged again. And then there's also, who we found out was Jimmy on the radio. So that would be a 6 there. It was fine. It wasn't bad. I'm also not going to do that thing where everything is like a 6 to a 9, although many of them are going to be. Like, if I don't like something, it's going to wind up at a 5 or less. But generally speaking, if I like something and I think it was good and well done, then it's going to be above a 5. So the third episode, Now in Color, that one I gave a 7. Again, it just it added to the mystery. It had a bit more at stake. You got to see that Geraldine was not who she said she was. Our first reference to Pietro and all of that, and kind of Vision starting to become suspicious of what's going on around him. The fourth episode, We Interrupt This Program, I am going to give an 8. That one is a really good like backstory, backdrop for all of this. We get all of the information for the first 3 episodes filled in. We get to see how they've been trying to infiltrate the anomaly, Monica going in and becoming Geraldine, Jimmy Woo using the radio to try to reach out, figuring out like how these things are even happening and how Sword can interact and all of that. Not to mention, it opened with us seeing for the first time what it was like for people to become undusted, which was kind of a big deal. So that was pretty huge. The 5th episode, on a very special episode, I'm giving that one a 9. And the kind of wham shot of, holy shit, that's Pietro, but the wrong one was like huge. But also there was the element of Wanda and Vision's fight was really good and really raw and a lot more emotional than I was expecting anything to get in here. Like, you get kind of used to superhero movie emotions of like wailing and like, oh, I'm really mad, I'm gonna beat you up. But like, this was like a legit sounding argument, and like, not to get too into details or whatever, but my parents split up when I was from 13 to 16 was kind of the period that happened. And I definitely remember a couple of the verbal fights that went down, and they got kind of ugly. And this accurately represented how some of that can go. And for someone who knows a bit about that, it was kind of like, it was very interesting because that's not a portrayal that I think gets done accurately in movies very often or TV shows. Like, you'll have a lot of, it's interesting the way that they get written in movies, especially since you've only got 2 hours and you've only probably got a couple minutes worth of time where you get to explore like a home dynamic. You get these really like general sort of like, oh yeah, okay, fine. Oh yeah, well, when your sister, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's kind of like vague stuff, but like, that's not how real fights go. Real fights, you get specific, you talk about like really impassioned things and you kind of zero in on them. So when Vision and Wanda start arguing about like specific things that are going on, and especially when she says like, I was doing it, I was, I chose to do it because it was best for you, and his like, you don't get to make that choice for me. Like, it's still a little bit held back by the fact that it's comic book programming writing, but it was a lot more on than I was expecting that to be. And like the whole last like 10 minutes of that episode were really, really good. I won't quite give it a 10, but it's pretty damn close. Like, I would almost give this, if I had to give decimals, I'd probably give this like a 9.3 or something. Like, very, very good. And then this episode on a all new Halloween Spooktacular, I'm going to give this one a 7 as well. Really good stuff there. The stakes have been raised. This one I was at odds with because I liked the episode. Like, the episode is important in ways that most of their episodes haven't been yet, but it wasn't as like powerful to me as episodes 4 and 5, which definitely had a lot more of like an emotional hit to them, whereas this one's a little more like we're getting into it a bit more. I think the next episode has a good chance of being a lot stronger of a showing. This one felt like good setup again. So we got our episode 4 and 5 were kind of a collective mid-season. I guess episode 5 more than anything was like the big mid-season like conflict point. Vision is pissed and he's trying to get out, and suddenly Pietro shows up. And this episode is sort of setting up the second half, which is kind of odd to think about since there's only 3 episodes left after this, but it is. It's kind of setting the new stakes, basically. And we're kind of midway into our second arc, and then we're going to probably, episode 7 is probably going to be where things start to turn, and I think episode 8 and 9 are going to be our big like combined finale there. But yeah, so those would be the rankings that I've given them so far. 7, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 7. We'll see how the other ones go. And yeah, I think those thumbnails I'll update when I get a chance. But I think that is it for me for this today. Feel free to leave some comments below. What do you think is going to happen for the rest of the season? What do you think the deal is with Pietro? Is he back to life? She does rewrite reality. Vision didn't quite collapse and die the way I thought he would when he tried to escape, but he was literally falling apart. So I think that's still in the cards that if he gets out, he's going to basically die. I suspect Pietro is going to be the same, but who knows? We have one of our 2 characters who are explicitly empowered or were explicitly given their powers by an Infinity Stone. So anything could happen, even though it was the Mind Stone and not the Reality Stone. But either way, thank you guys for watching. Looking forward to the rest of this series, and we'll see how things go from there. Catch you later.